Hey everyone, my name is Samara. I'm a graduate student out of the Nature Coast Biological Station, and today I'll just be giving you a very quick introduction to fish biology and fishery science in general. So what is fisheries biology? So fisheries biologists are people that study fish and their habitats, but this can be a very broad subject. So they can be biologists that study freshwater fishes, so fish in your lakes and streams and rivers, or they can be biologists that study saltwater fishes in the oceans or estuaries. And they can also be focused on a lot of different types of research. So we have fisheries biologists that study fish and their migration patterns. Um, where do they go during different seasons, or what habitats do they like to use? We also have people like myself that are more interested in management and fishing pressures. So when we talk about management, it's more of fish that are targeted for recreational fishing. So just with like hook and line, and we want to know how much our pressure is affecting their populations, or how changing certain regulations might impact their population and things like that. We also have biologists that study fish adaptations and how certain species are suitable for different types of habitats. So there's a lot of different areas that fisheries biologists can study, but this is just kind of like a general overview of kind of what we do. Before we go any further, I think it's important to first be on the same page and know exactly what a fish is. So a fish can be defined by a lot of different people in different ways, but in general, a fish is an aquatic organism that has a notochord or a backbone, has gills, and has limbs in the shape of fins. So we have arms and hands and legs, and they have fins. Now, this isn't true of all fish species, but in general, they can be classified that way. And there are over 30,000 fish species worldwide. They're one of the most diverse groups of animals on the planet. And there's four major groups of fishes. So you have your cartilaginous fishes, which are your sharks and your rays, bony fishes, you have jawless fishes like a lamprey, and you have hagfish. So first we're just going to go over some basic structures of fish using this largemouth bass here. So here are just kind of the different limbs of the fish. So we'll start here on the top, their dorsal side. This structure up here is their dorsal fin. Fish can have separate dorsal fins, or they can have one continuous dorsal fin. As you can see, it looks like this bass has two fins, but they're actually connected right here, but still have two parts. So the front part is their spiny dorsal fin. So here their fin rays are really sharp and rigid. And this helps in protection from predators, and also makes their size bigger. So it's harder for fish to be eaten from larger fish. And then their second part is their soft dorsal rays. So um, they're not rigid, they're flexible, things like that. Next, we have their pectoral fins. So these are typically at the sides of the fish, but they can be on the belly side, the ventral side. These pectoral fins actually help when a fish is swimming, move them up and down and kind of navigate them and steer them in the direction they want to go in. On the ventral side here, we have pelvic fins and anal fins. So anal fins are closer to the tail. Pelvic fins are usually closer to the head. And again, the pelvic fins can be moved backwards on a fish depending on how they've evolved and what they're used for. But these fins help with balance, keep them upright rather than rolling over in the water. If you think of a fish swimming through a medium that's 3D, they are not just walking on two legs, they have to navigate up, down, left, and right, and stay upright. So they have need help with a lot of balance. And then finally, we have their caudal fin, which is their tail fin. That is the main structure that helps them swim and propel through the water. Something else interesting is a lot of fish have an operculum, which covers their gills. So gills is a structure that helps them breathe and take up oxygen. And as water passes over their gills, they can kind of hold on to the oxygen in the water molecules. But a lot of bony fish have an operculum that covers the structure. And so you can tell a lot about a fish and sort of their behavior just by looking at it. So first, let's start with the mouth. So bass have a mouth that kind of faces up. So they're typically feeding on things that are higher than them. Sometimes they'll feed on fish, they'll pin them up against the surface of the water, or they'll eat bugs or something that fall onto the surface of the water. So their mouth faces up to kind of grab them up like that. But also they can sometimes be ambush predators, so they'll be down in like your grasses or weeds, and they'll kind of lunge at a fish as it's swimming by. You can also tell a lot about a fish by the shape of its caudal fin, its tail. Typically fish that are active swimmers and swim really fast have a really forked tail. This bass is slightly forked, but it's more rounded, more square, like this. Whereas if a forked tail would kind of fork down like that. And the forked tail just kind of helps them, helps the fish swim through the water with the least amount of resistance. So if you have a boxy tail, it's swinging back and forth, and it's going to create a lot of drag and resistance through the water, and that's going to slow it down. So we'll look at this redfish next. Redfish are some of the fish we commonly encounter in Cedar Key in the Gulf of Mexico. They're a saltwater fish. And again, you can look at similar structures of the fins. They again have that spiny dorsal fin and the soft dorsal fin. And you can see their caudal fin is much more square than the bass fin. These guys aren't bass swimmers, but something you can notice about this fish is instead of a mouth facing up, it has a mouth that faces down. So redfish feed on shrimp and crabs and things at the bottom of the seafloor, and so their mouth is facing down. It allows them to pick up those prey items from the floor. So with their fins, fish kind of have two main modes of swimming types. The first is called undulatory swimming. Undulatory just means that they have a wave, an S wave, that goes through their body or their fins, and it propels them through the water. And so there's different types of undulatory swimming. We're not going to go over them, but they just kind of refer to how much of their body has the wave going through it. So if you look at this picture of the eel on the left, right here, it has an S wave that starts at its head and goes all the way down through the caudal fin, whereas a tuna kind of just uses the last third of its body and its caudal fin. So there's different modes, but we can actually look at this video of some sharks swimming, and you'll be able to see them kind of swimming through the water. So both the fish and these hammerhead sharks are using undulatory swimming. And you can kind of just see they're kind of moving along, cruising along, and the last part is their tail, so their tail kind of whips around the fastest. But look at this shark right here. You can see them, that S wave moving through their body. All right, our second type of swimming is called oscillatory swimming. This is when you have a structure such as paired fins that swivel back and forth along a base that helps propel the fish forward. So it's no longer an S wave, it's kind of more of a back and forth motion. And this can be a movement of a fish's pectoral fins or their dorsal and anal fins. We'll see an example here with triggerfish. So triggerfish use their dorsal and their anal fins that swivel back and forth. So those are the main structures that help them swim. You can see the caudal fin is moving a little bit, but it's not really the main structure that's propelling them forward. So we're going to do a quick pop quiz here. I'm going to play this video of a stingray, and I want you guys to tell me what mode of swimming that you think it's using. So play it. It's a little tricky, but just look at it carefully. I'll play it again. All right, if you said undulatory swimming, you are correct. It's kind of hard to see, but if you look carefully, there's an S wave that's kind of going through its dorsal, the disc, which are actually its pectoral wings. So good job for those of you that said it. Just wanted to challenge your. There's also a lot of fish that have special adaptations for movement. So this is a batfish. We get the polka dot batfish off of Cedar Key. And they actually have modified pectoral and pelvic fins that resemble walking. So its pectoral fins are right here, and its pelvic fins, and they're really rigid and help them sit and stand on the seafloor. So if you see this video from our touch tank in our discovery room of a batfish that is just using its pectoral legs here to kind of move itself around the tank. So these guys aren't great swimmers, but they can still use their pectoral fins for swimming, just in a different way than other fish. So I want to share with you just kind of what we do in our day-to-day lives of how we get information from fish. They're different, and every biologist gathers information differently, but a lot of information can come from their internal structures and some of their organs. So we'll kind of look at that. The next slide will be kind of like a mini dissection of a fish. So if you're uncomfortable with some of those images, then feel free to skip through this part. So this is a spotted sea trout that was collected for my research, for my thesis. And actually something that a lot of biologists are interested in is in the sex of a fish. And we tell the sex of a fish through an organ called gonad. So in a female fish, they'll have ovaries, and a male fish, they'll have testes. And it's important to know the sex of a fish so we can understand kind of the population makeup of whatever fish species we're studying. So in this case, spotted sea trout, they're a heavily fished species, and we want to know proportionally how many are males to females, because that will tell us how many eggs are being laid in the system, and therefore how many potential newborns and therefore future adult sea trout we could have in the population. So by knowing how many females to males, you can get a good sense of how many newborns and how the population might be changing over time. So this fish these are its gonads right here. Here's one, here's two. These are actually female. So these are ovaries. You can see these bright orange dots. Those are their eggs. And in the next slide, you can actually see more clearly where each one of these little dots right here, these are each an egg. And so this one ovary that I'm holding has like all these eggs in it. So we'll have another quick pop quiz. All right, so we have another little pop quiz here just to get you thinking. How many eggs do you think a female fish can produce in a year? So you saw that picture of the ovary in the last slide. How many eggs do you think that fish could lay? If you said D, then you are correct. Now, this was kind of a trick question because it depends on the species and the conditions, but if you think of a spotted sea trout in this last slide, they can lay anywhere from 100,000 to up to 5 million eggs in a year. Typically, younger fish that are spawning for the first time will have kind of more on the low end, but your really older fish that are really great spawners, they can put out over 1 million eggs in a year. And fish have a lot of eggs, mostly because a lot of them don't survive. And so eggs are eaten by fish and birds and other species. And once they hatch and they're little tiny larval fish, they're even more susceptible to predation and also just stress in general. If the environmental conditions aren't right, it could be really harmful for them or really hard to find food. And so they put out a lot of eggs, and it ensures that a lot of fish will survive later. Another thing that's really important for my research and for a lot of um, other biologists actually comes from a structure in their head. So spotted sea trout, again, this is a whole spotted sea trout. We pull their ear bones. Now, I'll kind of walk you through this process first. So it's in the head, so we do have to cut them open to do that. And so they're kind of housed in this structure here. They're kind of in a bony structure. But once we pull them out, then we have what are called otoliths. So otolith translates to ear stone. So these are basically a fish's ear bones. And spotted sea trout in the drum family, sound is really important for these animals. They create these kind of croaking and drumming noises during the spawning season to attract females and to make sure everyone's spawning at the same time. But for us, these as biologists, these structures have really important biological information on it, in that this is how we tell how old this fish is. So if you look on this side, this is actually an otolith that has been cut into a really thin section, and it's magnified under a microscope. And you can see that these fish, and most bony fish, have these rings on them. So you can see this ring right here, this dark brown ring. And you can see another one right here that goes around. And these are laid in the winter, so a lot of fish are cold-blooded species, so they grow really fast in the summer when the water is warm. They have a lot of food resources, but in the winter they grow basically not at all. And so in the winter they get these dense opaque rings on their otolith, and you can count them like tree rings, and it'll tell you how old a fish is. So this fish has 2 rings. So this fish would have been about 2 years old. And so this is here when it was born, and this is its growth in its first year, and this was its first winter. And then you have growth in its second year, and this was its second winter. And then it had some more growth, and depending on when it was caught, we can tell if it was about to put down another ring or if it wasn't. So this is another pop quiz. I want y'all to tell me how many rings you can count on this otolith. You can pause it if you need to count. All right, so we'll count them together. So we'll start here at its core. So here we have 1 ring, we have a second ring, 3, 4, 5. So this fish has 5 rings. They're kind of hard to see. They're kind of thin over here, so it was a little bit of a hard question. And then it looks like it was maybe about to put down a 6th ring, but for now it has 5. And understanding age composition data is really important for biologists because it can again tell you the overall health of a population. So proportionally, you want to see, a good proportion of older fish and young fish. So you'll typically have more younger fish in a population and less older fish. However, as we learned in the previously, your older female spotted sea trout, and this is true of most fish, are your better spawners. They put out a lot more eggs, and those eggs are usually bigger, they're healthier, and they're more likely to survive. And so if you have an instance where you don't have some of those older fish in a population, then you're losing a lot of your really good spawners, and therefore you could lose, potentially see a population that starts to decline because you're not putting enough eggs or enough individuals back into your population. And this is true of a lot of species that are fished for. So spotted sea trout, as I said, were heavily fished, and the people kind of target the older fish first for more food, for more meat. So those bigger fish, those older fish, are usually taken out of the system first. And so you can start to see changes in the structure overall. So that was just a really quick intro to fish biology and kind of what you get out of some of our Seahorse Key educational programs. If you come back, we'll have a fish dissection for you guys. There's a lot more we can do with a fish dissection. You can look at stomach contents of a fish and see what they're eating, what's left in their stomach, what bones might be in there. Again, you can look at different habitat preferences and see, if you have an endangered species, what habitat you need to protect for that species. But in general, we want to learn population dynamics of a species and their mortality and survival rates in order to better understand them and better manage them. So you can test what you learned in today's lecture in the workbook that was provided to you guys. I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.